Service Episode 1 Introduction. This commentator is reading from the book Radiant Sameness, written by Professor Somraj Gupta. This book is English translation of Granth Samta Vilas by Mangat Ram Ji. This book is available on Amazon.com. Please see website samtavad.org for more information. A man identifies himself with his body. In reality, he is not a body but a soul. Service removes this false identification with the body. Man is destroying forests, other animals, and other human beings due to his selfishness. He is polluting and poisoning the planet. He cheats, lies, and even kills due to his selfishness. Service removes this disease. It reduces hatred and increases love. One cannot serve and hate at the same time. It removes false pride and arrogance. It washes away filth of one's mind. These days, human beings hate each other. They cannot get along even with their spouses and children. Divorce rates are increasing. There is conflict everywhere. Hindus, Muslims, and Christians are fighting with one another. Service decreases this conflict. Saying 57, page 112, Radiant Sameness. A principle divine is the principle of service, the principle great and the means great, to redeem this fallen being from his fallen condition. To bliss supreme does it lead him, to make him on up to and be that his very being. A disease great and serious is the intellect focused on self-interest and self-concerns. With infatuations, it roasts a being, and with desires without account to tempt him onto sins great and appalling. Infernal indeed is this his condition. From this darkness, blind and blinding, there is the benign spirit of service to lead him on to light. No more will he remain confined to himself, the man that in his wisdom has adopted this principle, for onto the real will it lead him, onto that beatitude blessed and supreme. Saying 57, comment. Service is a supreme mean to free a man from his deviations and absorb him in supreme bliss. A man suffers from sins of sensuality, wrath, greed, infatuation, and false pride. Disease of selfishness roasts a man in fire of infatuation. He commits appalling sins due to this disease. He cheats, lies, robs, and even kills. Such a state is hell itself. Light of service dispels darkness of selfishness. A person who adopts this mean frees himself from this darkness and attains supreme beatitude. Saying 58, page 113, Radiant Sameness. Three are the desires that hold ever and always this being under their sway: the desire to be embodied, the desire for possessions, and the desire to think of and deliberate about the objects set up before him and to enjoy those objects. Never would these let him be free and at rest, whatever be his status and influence and the extent of his pleasures. Ever infatuated he lives, oblivious of his truth and being, to end up in sin and ruin. Saying 58, comment. A man is always trapped in desires of his mind, body, and possessions. He has false hope that these desires will give him lasting happiness. He is unable to have even one moment of peace after he has reached the highest status in life. He lives absorbed in these desires all the time and wastes his life in false hope and sin. Saying 59, page 113, Radiant Sameness. Service is the mean, real and effective, to his freedom from these, his fetters 3. Dedicated to it, he will dedicate himself to the Lord to find in his will the joy he truly seeks. Saying 59, comment. Service is the true mean to get freed from these 3 fetters. By doing service, he overcomes these obstacles and gets dedicated towards God. Then verily he attains lasting joy he seeks. He is no longer trapped in false hopes of his mind, body, and possessions. Saying 60, page 113, Radiant Sameness. His desire for possessions will come to an end, and so will the hope he reposes in them when he resorts to giving and to charity, his goodwill and service appeasing him and his desire. Devotion indeed is the spirit of service. Renunciation supreme it is, and deliverance from every ill and calamity. Saying 60, comment. False hope of lasting happiness from his wealth is destroyed in a person who gives his money in charity. He is appeased by doing charity. Service of others is supreme renunciation and devotion. Service delivers him from all calamities. Saying 61, Radiant Sameness, page 113. Service without a self-interest, indeed, is the service, the real and genuine. The service prompted by some self-interest will only thicken the darkness already thick, the darkness enveloping every being. A prisoner of infatuations it will make of him to swell his pride and inflate his ego. This base disposition can do no good to him, not until his service turns pure of every self-interest. Saying 61, comment. Selfless service alone is genuine service. A man gives charity to a temple, but brags everywhere that he gave thousands of dollars to this temple. He serves for his own name and fame. Such service prompted by self-interest only increases his arrogance and self-infatuation. It increases darkness of his ignorance. It swells his false pride, and it inflates his ego into a huge balloon. This base disposition does not do any good to him. He needs to learn to serve without any self-interest. Left hand should not know what the right hand is doing. Saying 62, Radiant Sameness, page 113. Disinterested service is the very goal of life. Air is there to blow for others, water is there to flow for others, the earth is there to stay for others, and the sun and the moon are there to shine for others. In doing these functions, they merely perform the roles assigned to them. No self-interest do they have to serve. In the same way, a man should also serve others, taking it as his duty and obligation. Then will he carry out in truth and reality the command of his Lord. Not long shall he have to wait for the blessed joy to on him up. Saying 62, comment. Selfless service is the goal of human life. Just as air, water, the earth, and the sun and the moon perform their duty selflessly, a man has obligation to serve others in similar way. Then only he obeys the will of God and attains supreme joy. Page 114, Radiant Sameness, saying 63. Service rendered to others with his possessions, with his body and through his mind will release a man from all his aberrations and will lead him on to find the joy undying and eternal. Service indeed is the supreme righteousness. It indeed is the way to redemption. A man who would not serve others but only himself is man the evil, ever restless and anxious. A prisoner of greed he, and of pride and arrogance and jealousy. These evil traits ever consuming him and making his life a hell. Not a moment of generosity does he find, that man the evil. Death itself is this, kind and dark disposition. Every moment will this disposition tempt one into pleasures false and delusive, from one pleasure to another. Service indeed is the sword to cut asunder this, his entanglement in those pleasures, an easy way to that end. Bliss the real will always elude the man who feels not for others and would not care to work for their good. Saying 63, comment. Let a man serve others with his body, mind, and possessions. He will be freed from deviations of lust, anger, greed, infatuation, and false pride. He will attain eternal joy. Service alone is supreme dharma, righteousness, and redemption. A man who does not serve is always restless due to his evil intellect. He is always roasting in greed, infatuation, arrogance, and envy. He makes his life a hell. He does not feel even a moment of generosity. This darkness of ignorance is death itself. It leads him astray into delusion and temptation of false bodily pleasures. The sword of service cuts asunder these fetters. A man who does not serve and think well of others cannot have true joy. Saying 64, Radiant Sameness, page 114. Each act of disinterested service a man renders unto others through his body, his mind, and in terms of his possessions will take him on towards that peace, the eternal. The spirit of uprightness will dawn upon him, of contentment and forgiveness, and so will the power to know what is good and evil, what is real and unreal. The real alone will become his refuge, his life and breath. His sins will melt away, sins one and all, his peace indivisible reclaimed. That is the way one is to worship, the way genuine and authentic. Saying 64, comment. When a man serves others with his body, mind, and possessions selflessly, he attains eternal peace, peace that passes human understanding. Selfishness is the root of many problems today. Man is exploiting others and polluting the environment in his greed. Some persons do not hesitate to kill others for their profit. Selfless service gives ethical behavior, contentment, forgiveness, and faith of God. God alone becomes his refuge. His suffering gets removed. That is the way of genuine worship. Saying 65, Radiant Sameness, page 114. The false appearances that delude the living being, those deviations and falling from their truth and their being, will come to cease for the man that gives himself to disinterested service. With the Lord as his sole refuge and resort, he will come to be blessed with joy the everlasting. This verily is the way straight to blessedness, the way straight to liberation. Saying 65, comment. A man is in bondage of false hope from his body, mind, and possessions. Pleasures of body, mind, and possessions give him only a temporary pleasure and lead to suffering later. The bondage of this false hope is removed with selfless service. He comes to know that God alone can give him eternal joy. This way he redeems himself. Page 115, Radiant Sameness, saying 66. His sense of me and mine will not die out, that cause of his recurring births and deaths, if he does not resort to the way of service. Let man therefore have every goodwill for others and spend his resources on them, and let him do this service with every humility in his mind. This disposition of service with humility will undo his sense of me and mine, that death of him, giving rise to the vision of self-sameness, the vision that is liberation itself. No desire will then rise to bind him. Established will he be in his own being the eternal. And that is what is called moksha, or liberation, or blessedness, the eternal, that state of his. Saying 66, comment. His selfishness or sense of me and mine is the cause of his recurrent births and deaths. Selfless service removes news of selfishness. Let him give his mind and possessions in service to others. Then vision of self-sameness, which is liberation, manifests itself. He attains full control of all desires and abides in his eternal self. This is state of nirvana or liberation. A selfish man is miserable himself and makes others miserable. Selfishness is the root of much misery in the world. Saying 67, page 115, Radiant Sameness. As long as the sense of me and mine persists in man, that miserable disposition of self-service, there will be no release for him from the desires that his mind ever generates in him. Nor can he know what dharma in its truth is, that regulative principle of life. A man in the grip of selfishness has no principles that could inspire trust and confidence in him. That cheat and fraud has only one principle, to exploit and use others for his own ends. This disposition of his is the disposition of Rakshasas, of beings evil and subhuman, a disposition that will ever burn him with desires that nothing can appease. A heavy load of calamity will he carry on to the lives to come. Saying 67, comment. As long as he has disease of selfishness, his desires of mind are not removed. He cannot distinguish between true and untrue dharma or righteousness. A selfish man does not have any principles. He cannot be trusted. He tries to exploit and use others deceptively for his own selfish desires. He lives a demonic life and roasts in fire of desire which nothing can appease. He departs from the word in intense calamity. Unfortunately, many persons today lead a totally selfish and demonic life. They have no principles and exploit others ruthlessly. They suffer themselves and make others suffer too. They are a burden on this earth. If they follow teaching of Mangat Ram Ji, there will be hope for them. Saying 68, page 115, Radiant Sameness. If the mind is not directed towards service of others, it is bound to get oriented towards self-service. It is in the nature of the mind to be ever active, to be ever disposed to act this way or that. If it is not directed towards observance of dharma, of the law, sure it is that it will get immersed in evil. Let no one be oblivious of this fact. Saying 68, comment. If the mind does not engage in service, then it will be oriented towards selfishness. It is the nature of the mind to be active. If it is not directed towards righteousness, it will move towards evil. One should know this for certain. Saying 69, Radiant Sameness, page 115. Let your mind ever remain faithful to dharma, faithful to the law, so that you may be blessed with peace, the true, and be freed from the misery that has ever scorched you life after life and death after death. To keep the mind under restraint and to orient it towards the law is the prerogative vouchsafed to man to turn his death into an ecstasy and into release. Release the final from every calamity, from the very possibility of it. Saying 69, let a man direct himself to genuine dharma or righteousness as taught by Mangat Ram Ji. He will attain true peace and will be freed from scorching misery of this world. Even if he becomes rich, he cannot get rid of the misery. He will have genuine spiritual treasure of the word by following this teaching. This treasure goes with him even after his death. Let him restrain his mind and orient it towards genuine dharma. This endeavor will lead him to supreme happiness. He will be released from every calamity. This is the end of episode 1. It will be episode 1 of service will be continued in the next episode, episode 2.